Hiya, my name is McCarthy Coyle, and I'm glad to be here. It's going to be the most fun I've had this weekend. I'm here with two folks, two citizens of Missoula that I've known in and out over the years, not real well, but as other people moving through city life. Sue Silverberg, for example, who was on the Local Government Study Commission, which, these days you walk around, I talk to friends, and I said, well, I'm going to do a show about the neighborhood councils. And they say, the neighborhood councils? I said, yeah, remember you voted for it last year, right? So we voted, the city of Missoula, a majority of the citizens decided last year that we wanted a new charter for the city that would give us greater self-governing powers. And the majority of us voted for that. We also voted for a couple of other things. We voted that we wanted to put an end to partisan elections of folks moving on to city council, and that these would, so we supported that with a majority vote, nonpartisan elections to city offices. And we also chose to establish a group of neighborhood councils, right, that would kind of assist the city council in doing their work. And I think that perhaps at this point in the game, many months after that election, well, how many months is it since last June, right?
Right.
So about 10 months, and I'm thinking, so now we have to deal with this. And what the city did is they turned around and city council, right, and appointed 11 citizens, and you were two of those 11, to kind of move through the community. You have a real small budget, I understand. Do you know how much you've got to fool around with?
We have about $6,500.
About $6,000 to go around the city, do surveys, meet with people, do presentations, and to try and, I think, as I understand your job, of this 11 of you, in the process of moving through the city, is trying to come up with language to give to the city council and say, well, this is what we found out. We've studied up on neighborhood councils in other places, and then you shared some notes with me that I read about these neighborhood councils working like in St. Paul, Minnesota, Portland, Oregon was another. Would there be another one that would be more our size?
Well, there's Helena, Montana.
Helena, Montana, okay. So these folks then have the job. By the way, this is a live call-in show. It's the 23rd of February, and we'll be taking your calls about 9:45. We hope that you're just, hovering by the phone. Hardly, but we wanted to take this time to I wanted to take the time so that I could get filled in a little bit. And if I ask you some questions, maybe they'll, help clarify a few things. So I think I've got everything right so far, right? You're supposed to give the city council a specific ordinance language, possibly, or draft, as it were. Actually, give them a draft ordinance.
Well, we're supposed to give them a proposal for how we feel the best plan for neighborhood councils that would work in Missoula. And then, in addition to that, to put that in ordinance language so that they can hold public hearings on it.
Okay. What ideally, I mean, that's I guess we shouldn't use that word, but I mean, what are these, what do you, first of all, I'm sorry, I want to know, what are these neighborhood councils supposed to be doing, right? With and for us. And I wanted to, every once in a while, I like to rely on the plain spokenness of words. Neighbor, we're talking about neighborhood council. Neighbor, one who lives near or next to another, a person, place, or thing adjacent to or located near another, a fellow human being. Used as a form of familiar address, well, hi neighbor. To live or be situated close by. Situated or living near another. A neighbor state. A state that would be near us. A dweller. and then it has a word history in the dictionary. Loving one's neighbor as oneself would be much easier, or perhaps much more difficult, if the word neighbor had kept to its, I'm not sure I know how to say that. We're getting into fancy dictionary language here, but there was something in here that says, and our modern English version of the word neighbor have all retained the literal notion, even though one can now have many neighbors whom one does not know. So that you're living in a neighborhood sometimes, and yet there are neighbors that you don't know. And then it goes on, a neighborhood, a district or an area with distinctive characteristics. An ethnic neighborhood, a neighborhood of fine homes. The people who live near one another. The noise upset the entire neighborhood. I thought that was interesting, as an example of the use of the word, because I think one of the reasons it seems to me that we have neighborhood groups now in Missoula is to work together to not only to celebrate the neighborhood, but to, if there's a problem like noise, to deal with it. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was good to look up neighbor and neighborhood, and then I looked up council, because you guys are in the business of setting up neighborhood councils. An assembly of persons called together for consultation, deliberation, or discussion. A body of people elected or appointed to serve in an administrative, legislative, or advisory capacity, for example. So, end of, I think dictionaries sometimes are helpful. Now, what are you doing? Where are we at in the process? You're going to have a couple of public meetings. You've got stuff at the library that people can pick up. It's on reserve, or they can take it out.
No, it's on reserve.
On reserve at the reference desk. So these, all right. Now, all right, your turn. I went on at great length, but.
All right, John.
It's really interesting, McCarthy, that you start with this, looking at the semantics of the term neighbor and neighborhood. We've been dealing with that since, when were we called together? The beginning of October?
September.
In September sometime. We officially started meeting in October. It touches on two things, really. The charge that we were given by the City Council and the language that comes from the charter itself in terms of the neighborhood district councils is really fairly simple and fairly direct. They're groups of a more local basis, that is neighborhood area basis, whose purpose is to help pass information back and forth between the City Council and citizens. Okay?
Right.
And to be advisory in that sense to the City Council.
This neighborhood council.
Right. And we like to refer to them as neighborhood district councils, because we make no pretensions about trying to define a neighborhood. That is, set the parameters, the boundaries of where a neighborhood is.
Right.
Neighborhoods do that fine. They've done that fine without our help for years.
Right.
They will continue to do it fine without our help forever.
Right.
What we are doing is setting up neighborhood districts, and those districts, which will all include more than one neighborhood, will then have these councils. Now, what's interesting in your discussion of neighbor and neighborhood is that you touched on a lot of very important things that I see these councils hopefully very soon dealing with, above and beyond this fairly simple charge that the charter and the City Council comes to us with. That is getting into the more I would say the more meaningful elements of developing livability and developing community in a neighborhood.
I think we're going to have enough time, because I like to pursue that part of the discussion. But I think I have sometimes an easier time chewing on something if I get a few particulars in my head as to what happens,
Sure.
right? For example, how would a neighborhood council interact with the city? Would they, would the council elect people who would then be their official coordinators to the city? I mean, this would be an existing part of the city governing process, right?
I don't
The
think
neighborhood
that's
council? No?
necessarily the way we're looking at it, because we're looking at something that's very grassroots and citizen-oriented.
Right.
I mean, basically, neighborhood councils are an access point for citizens to get involved in government.
Right.
But they can also get involved in development projects in their neighborhood or community building in their neighborhood. It's a place to learn about government, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's part of government.
So you see, wait, did I hear two things? One, yes, the council is the neighborhood group is a conduit of information to and from the city government, but at the same time, it is paying attention to things on its own within the neighborhood.
Right.
And you mentioned an example. Could you give us another couple, maybe?
Well, an example, I mean, neighborhood councils could do lots of different things. They could organize a daycare co-op in the neighborhood. They could do a conservation project. They could... Right,
okay, but let me throw in here. Nothing's stopping them from doing that now. Therefore, what is the advantage here to...
To do that?
To do it... If we can do it now, and if some of us are doing it now in a neighborhood, as a neighborhood organization, without benefit of, the law, and it's going to become part of the city charter, what's the advantage to us moving, I know we're...
Well, like you said, there are some neighborhood organizations who are doing really exciting projects like that.
Right.
However, there's lots of parts of the city that really aren't represented. There aren't active groups. People don't know how to get organized.
So how are you, I asked, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a, Marga
Lincoln.
Marga Lincoln, thanks, who is working also with you folks, and they did a lot to pull the crew together, all volunteer crew here at Missoula Community Access Television, Channel 7 in the city of Missoula, and it's open to one and all to do with what you wish yourselves. So we have no special privileges here. Come down, take the training, grab a camera, reserve time in the editing room, go live, but you're watching on what we like to think of as one of the best facilities in the country for this kind of thing. And so we had an all-volunteer crew that Marga helped round up, so thanks also there. These, I get the impression, like, the documents that I got to read from about councils in St. Paul and Portland, which are larger and wealthier cities, not that and a lot of this information was coming from the 1970s, 1980s, when there was a lot of cash flowing through the pipeline, community development block grants. Some of the neighborhood councils were publishing newspapers. There were a lot of bells and whistles. Some and many of which I was interested in, others I was less interested in. But how does that fit in with us today? And what kind of things do you hear out there? I mean,
one of the things that you hear a lot of is that the cities that have active neighborhood, not too many of them actually call them neighborhood councils, but grassroots type of neighborhood-based organizations that interact amongst themselves and with the cities, excuse me, are some of a number of these cities have been identified as some of the most livable cities in the country.
Those with neighborhood councils.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seattle, St. Paul, Portland, all three of them. Dayton, Ohio, Birmingham, Alabama.
Right.
And I don't think that's coincidence because
John, by the way, did his graduate studies in this area. And where was that, John?
At the university here.
At this
right.
Okay. University one time. So it gets an extra blessing, right? Because it. All right.
I'm not sure. I must admit, it is very satisfying to actually take what was an academic exercise and now
work on
help
it. Good.
help.
Anyway, I interrupted,
Right.
but I wanted to give you your credentials.
What's really
You're talking about livability.
Right. What's really been almost universal in all of these cities that have started these things, and I might add too that they have years of experience over us, and they had an advantage of having an impetus from the federal government in most cases to get started, because most of this happened during the Model Cities era,
Right.
when the federal government said that you had to have some kind of neighborhood
Right.
organization that is
to get the money.
to get the money, right?
Right.
Right. We don't have that.
Right.
We also don't have the years. We've got 6 months to get our proposal together.
Uh-huh.
But anyhow, what I started to say was, one of the really intriguing things was when this started happening in almost every one of those cities, the governing bodies were very nervous. The city council people or whatever they were called in whichever city, were very nervous until about the first year after they started functioning.
Yeah.
And then, as far as I know, without exception, the city council very soon learned that these groups actually helped them do their work a lot. Almost, I mean, it's interesting what we're hearing right now from our city council members is they're saying, let's see, neighborhood councils could do this for us, and they could do this for us, and they could do this for us. And while I'm glad to see city council members thinking about how these efforts can join together in terms of a healthy cooperative effort of running the business of the city, it is important to remember that these city councils or these neighborhood district councils are, as Sue said, a grassroots-based citizen effort, and are not particularly a function of the city government.
Something I noticed in the reading materials you gave me, for example, they were talking about that in other cities where there were, official neighborhood councils, whatever they were called, but there was a reference to that they, at least in this one city, I forget which, could deal with zoning issues, and there probably somebody had a house and wanted to build a little extra barn on the garage or a workshop or what that. Could you elaborate on that? I mean, when you talk about workload, because I sometimes think if I was on city council, that I would not, that's why I'm not there. I mean, they have to hear every single, if somebody needs to move a piece of something, it seems to me as a, layperson, then they have to go through City Hall, and City Council doesn't like it, and the person does. So could neighborhood councils conceivably get involved in this without upsetting?
Well, basically, in other communities that have neighborhood councils, it's not that the neighborhood councils do the work of zoning, but it becomes really common for, say, developers to go to the neighborhood councils first before they would go to the city council. And if there's a big project that they're looking at doing in the neighborhood, it makes sense to talk to the citizens in that neighborhood, find out what people feel about it, get citizen investment or get criticism, shape the proposal. Then the proposal would go to the OPG or to the city. And at that point, there would have been citizen involvement. And again, in communities where there are neighborhood councils processes that do that, the developers, the city, the citizens seem to be much more satisfied.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a couple of points on that regard.
And phone lines are open, I guess everybody knows. So
the opportunity people have right now to become involved in issues like zoning are particularly unsatisfying and unproductive.
You mean like when you go into before the microphone?
Yeah, right. I spent 5 years at the city county planning office, and had to sit through more public hearings than I care to think about. And after having done that, I don't even like to call them public hearings. I like to call them public talkings, because they aren't designed for people to listen to each other, for people to dialogue with each other. By the time the public hearing comes up, The
it's like
line
playing
is
pool,
drawn.
you take your shot, he takes his shot.
And we'll see who can exert the most influence, and we're simply out there to try to win. With a citizen-based system like neighborhood district councils, hopefully this dialogue will start much earlier. Issues will come to these neighborhood district councils before they're at loggerheads. And people will have a tendency to see each other as human beings and discuss things with them.
Do you feel that as you're going through this process, you got a couple of public meetings coming up, right? And did I misread an earlier version of this? Let's see, Thursday, March the 6th at 7 p.m. and Saturday, March the 8th at 2 p.m. Got it on there? You see that one? Can you, from memory, because I can't read that backwards.
That's correct. March 6th at 7 p.m. and March 8th at 2 p.m. at the First United Methodist Church, which is on Main Street.
Now we got that camera coming in there. Okay, all right, so there's a public meeting. What's your deadline? Do you have a deadline? I saw two different versions of your deadline. What is it?
Well, basically, by March 31st, we need to give the city council a proposal of our best efforts for what neighborhood councils might look like.
Right.
Then the city council will listen to that proposal. We also have to come up with ordinance language, and probably will be
at the same time.
Well, there's some question. I mean, we need to come up with ordinance language soon after March 31st,
right.
And then we'll be getting some feedback from the city council, and then the city council has to hold public hearings.
Right.
I mean, they can basically accept our proposal. They can say,
amend
we
it.
want you to change it, or they could change it themselves.
Right.
But in either regard, they need to hold public hearings on a system of neighborhood councils and get public feedback.
Okay.
And then neighborhood councils need to go into effect after June 1st.
Okay. We got a call on line 1. Hello, you're on the air.
Good evening. I'd just like to make a comment about the issue, about the concept of neighborhood councils. Would you not agree with me that the establishment of neighborhood councils is simply adding one more layer of bureaucracy to an already overloaded, populace? And the reason I'm asking that is this: I feel like I am capable, in and of myself, to, if I have a problem that I feel like my city council member can help me with, I can either, one, call them, write them with my question, with a problem, and communicate in that way. I can do it one-to-one. Why is there a need? Why are you proposing the concept of neighborhood councils? Why do you think there's a need for it? I'd really appreciate a full and elaborate explanation, please. Thank you very much.
And thanks for your question. Do you want me to hold on to you, or?
Let's do it, if you wish.
Okay, and I will say that it isn't these folks, but that in our election last June, it was the majority of the folks in Missoula who said they wanted to go for neighborhood council. So.
What's the need for it, McCarthy? We're only 70,000.
I'm just saying these folks are not individually responsible for inventing this particular new wheel that we're going to spin around. But the citizens asked us to put neighborhood councils in place, and these people are going around town trying to listen to everybody's complaints, I'm sure, objections, and anyway, enough of that. You guys got the answer for that, I hope.
That is very important, McCarthy, what you mentioned, because this is a unique project in that we are not engaged in a dialogue over whether or not this is going to happen. That dialogue happened a year ago. The citizens of Missoula voted fairly overwhelmingly in favor of doing this. It is now our charge to come up with a recommendation to the city council for how this can best work. And what's really interesting is that we're working with a lot of people who were not in favor of this idea prior to the election, who are now saying, well, we had that discussion, we're going to have neighborhood district councils. I too want to see that it works as best as it possibly can for the city.
In other words, meaning people who were maybe opposed to the idea when they came to the ballot box, but
yes,
they're going to be councils and they want to be part of it.
Yeah, that part of the community is even represented on our committee. Now, to get to the caller's question, you indeed do have the power and the right, and I would say the responsibility, to take your concerns to your city council members. Nothing that we're doing, nothing that the city will do when it establishes neighborhood district councils will change that at all. What we're dealing with here is what I like to characterize as a broader civic dialogue, the ability to get beyond what I see as my parochial interests, what I want, and I'm going to badger my council representative until I get what I want, but rather have a dialogue with my neighbors, and not just with my neighbors. I live in the university area, not just with my neighbors in the university area, but I think I have a responsibility as a citizen to reflect what I want as a member of the university area against what is good for the entire city. And the reason I say that these are not an additional layer of bureaucracy is that if they were doing nothing more than what is already being done, I would say this is indeed another layer and it's superfluous and we shouldn't have it. But we don't have a vehicle right now where people have to come together and talk with each other about what they see as good for their lives and for their neighborhood, and to reflect it against what is good and healthful and helpful for neighborhoods across the city. It's just not there.
I'm just wondering, John and Kohler, do you think this would be a good time to take a look at these geographical options that so far you've developed? They've got maps in back of me. One that is the city with 8 neighborhood councils and one with 11. Do you think this would be a good time to just take a quick look at those? You want to explain those a little bit, John?
I'd be glad to.
And if I'm in the way, Director, just tell me to move.
Okay. What our committee has come up with so far is actually 2 separate options. We haven't come to consensus on one over the other. And once again, I would like to reiterate that we are not defining neighborhoods. What we are doing is creating neighborhood districts that include what we feel are logically grouped together neighborhoods in districts. There are probably, depending on how you define a neighborhood, there could be as many as 48, 49 different neighborhoods in the city of Missoula. To have a district council in each one of those neighborhoods, we think would be administratively unmanageable, and I'm not sure would be totally consistent with what we're trying to do anyways, which is encouraging communication between neighborhoods and across the city. So back to these 2 different options. Using the principles of grouping similar neighborhoods together, neighborhoods that have shared issues and problems, neighborhoods that are constrained by shared geographic boundaries. In this large district option, there are 8 districts, and I'll go through them very quickly. One is the entire Rattlesnake area.
For those of us who have terrible perception problems, so where's Hellgate Canyon and where's the river? And
thank you, McCarthy. This is the Clark Fork River. This is Hellgate Canyon.
Okay.
Ben Hughes Edition over here.
Okay.
The interstate is this bright red line.
Okay. All right. Good.
Clark Fork River as it comes through here. And here's the Bitterroot River coming up to the south.
Good. Thanks.
All right.
Yep.
So
and the strip would be.
The strip is this is Brook Street right here.
Good. Thanks.
Heading down to Lolo.
All right.
All right.
Yep.
So once again, also mentioned that all of the property within the city limits of Missoula are included in one of these neighborhood districts or another, okay? So if you live within the city limits, you would be included in one of these neighborhood districts. So these districts are the Rattlesnake District, which includes the lower Rattlesnake, the west side and the upper Rattlesnake area. Grant Creek, the north and west side, all the way out to Reserve Street. This is Reserve Street here. The University, Historic South Side, McCormick, Slant Street area. This is South Avenue right here. The South Hills, Wapakea area. This would be, I don't know what we would call this. It's from Russell west to the city limits, including the city property around Fort Missoula, and so on and so forth. And then this district here between 39th Street, South Avenue, Russell, or I'm sorry, the railroad tracks, and Southwest Higgins.
Okay. So that would be 8 districts, and you call that the large district option.
Right.
Now we've got one with 11 districts.
11 districts, and what this does is make the districts a little bit smaller, and there are just a few more of them. A couple of them don't change. The Rattlesnake stays the same. Grand Creek stays the same. There is a, I guess, for want of a better term, a downtown district here. Goes all the way out to the Ben Hughes area. A north side district, west side district. The University, Slant Street, Historic South Side and McCormick district. The area between Mount and South Avenue then is taken out of this district and it becomes like a Sentinel or Fairgrounds district.
Okay.
The neighborhood around Whitaker, South Hills, and Wapakea on this side, and then from Russell to the west side again.
Good. I mean, I think that that gives a good introduction. I mean, essentially, it's you know, whether did I hear you correctly when you said like the 11 strikes you anyway sometimes as too big administrative?
No, I don't think so.
Did I misunderstood something then?
No, I think either of these options are well within, you know, administrative possibilities.
But let me have a couple of. Now I realize that you're still processing. I mean, you're still hearing from people. Are there surveys that people can get from you that you want, or I mean, is there anything else that people need to know about how they can, other than your upcoming meetings and stuff like that?
Well, we do have a voicemail number that people can always leave messages for us
and shout
ask
it
questions.
out.
And our voicemail number is 523-4896.
523-4896. Voicemail. Leave a message with your question. They'll get back to you.
Like McCarthy said, we have a folder in the library with all of our minutes and information about neighborhood councils, and that's at the reserve desk. And then we also have, we've hooked onto the website page, the homepage of the city of Missoula. And so if people want to email us, we have, it's kind of a long one, so you can reach us at
www.ism.net/tilda/Missoula/NETCON.html. I'm getting too old. That's a mouthful. I'm not going to. You will not be hearing from me on that. Caller on line 1, you've been very patient. We have another call on 2. Do you want to make a quick comment?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Hang in there, line 2.
Confess that I was totally confused by your gentleman's presentation of the districts, and I once again ask you, what is the real need? I have heard ethereal sort of general reasons for comments.
Okay, thanks a lot for calling.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be with you on the other line in a minute.
I'd like to answer your question. I was on the Local Government Study Commission, and I'm actually one of the people who was looked at the idea of neighborhood councils initially. And the reason that we looked at that was because we heard overwhelmingly from citizens in Missoula that citizens want greater access. They want to be involved in local government. They want to have greater say in how things are shaped in their neighborhood and the community. And so we came up with the idea of neighborhood councils, which neighborhood councils have been a great success in other communities. And like McCarthy mentioned, citizens again overwhelmingly said in a vote, let's go forward with this. And so we've heard the need and we're responding to it.
Let me ask you a couple nitty-gritty questions that have been on my mind. In other words, like, as you're going to be making, I mean, will you be recommending things like, well, how does what are some of give us two options of how the councils relate to the city government? You know, like whether they elect two of their, own folks from that district, the neighborhood council to be their official conduit. And then, in fact, let's hold an answer to my question and give the caller on line 2. Hi, you're on the air.
Yeah. Hi.
Hiya.
First of all, I'd like to say I think this is a marvelous idea. Like you were suggesting, it gives the people in the Missoula community to start to come together, on the idea of governing this country. And it's from the ground up. It's where we need to start. But I do have some questions about this. How do you propose to handle elections, first of all? And are you going to have campaigning involved in those elections? And of course, politics. How are we going to eliminate this awful politics?
Correct me if I'm wrong, caller, but I think that his first question kind of, I'd like to think it was somewhat connected with that last question of mine. I mean, what's the relationship between city council, city government? I mean, what are some of the things that you're looking at, and what are you hearing? I mean, how does...
Well, to address the caller's question, what we're looking at is, we're calling it a selection process and not an election process, but to have a town meeting process in each of the neighborhood district areas where citizens would be given a lot of information about an upcoming selection process and encouraged to participate, and those citizens would then select from those people who attend the meeting their neighborhood leaders. But within every neighborhood council district, everybody who lived in that district would be eligible to participate and eligible to vote. And the reason that we're suggesting that process is just like the caller said, is somewhat to take some of the politics out of the process, to make it a more grassroots process. And when we looked at kind of formal election processes, the cost, the administration is really pretty complicated, and we don't want this to mimic. This is not city government. This is not city council. This is a grassroots effort. And so we hope that the selection process will mimic that. I also just want to say that what you're hearing tonight, this is our draft proposal. And certainly the whole point is that we want public feedback to shape that proposal, and that's what these public meetings are about. That's what this is about tonight. And so nothing is, in stone. We want to hear from people because we want to put forth the best proposal to represent Missoula. So
one of the things that I think is really important to remember is that we do not see these neighborhood district councils as even quasi-legislative. Okay, they are not intended to have a policy-making role or purpose. And because of that, we don't want
that boggles me a little bit. How do you mean that you don't want them to have a policy-making role? I mean, I would think if I was in my neighborhood group, I'd, or you're talking about...
I think everybody thinks that they will influence policymakers.
Right.
And the policymakers themselves I think, see them that way.
Right.
In fact, they hope that they are and this is what we're hearing from city council people, that they hope that they are a more representative voice of the people. Because right now, what a lot of
so
city
they're
council...
influencing policy, but they're not making policy.
They're not making policy. That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. And above and beyond that, this may be just my personal element that seems important just to me, but I don't think it's just mine. It's the discussion, the dialogue that goes on between people in sharing ideas, developing proposals. That's what's sorely lacking in our political process right now. Our entire political process, our entire democracy is focused on that one day that we vote, and that's it. And where that importance should be is in how we share ideas, how we express and listen to each other's concerns, and then make our judgment and our opinion upon that. That's one of the reasons why, as Sue said, we're shying away from a formal election process, because those are expensive. We don't have a lot of resources to put into this. The city does not either. And we could shoot our entire budget on an election, which in my mind is very low in terms of the importance of what these neighborhood
In other words,
councils
it
will do.
sounds like you're saying we think that when we get to the point where we have neighborhood councils, that they'll have enough intelligence to figure out how they're going to put together their council, their own district. Or
Well, I mean, we are suggesting some guidelines, and we'll probably provide a model bylaws. But we'd like each neighborhood district council to have some flexibility to determine how best to organize.
Well, maybe this is a know-nothingism on my part, but like I saw a reference in one of the city reports about, meaning in my readings about St. Paul or wherever, and it said, and you learn Robert's Rules of Order, and I thought, I don't want to learn Robert's Rules of Order. If that's the way it's going to be, that's just that gut reaction that I had. That was one thing, and
We're not suggesting that.
Yeah. Okay. But what happens? Let's say if you've got. I realize that a lot of our neighborhoods are fairly well mixed. Others, some less than others, some more than others. But how do you see it working? Because some of us, maybe have been around longer, and so we think we're a little bit smarter than the next guy. And so let's say, take X neighborhood. Let's blame it on the north side. And let's take the north side and say that's the north side neighborhood. But let's say there's this little pocket of people that, don't like those folks over there, and they're greens, and they've got, they just want to turn the place into organic garden. How do you respond and listen and get ideas for, how can we overcome that, for example? Or is that a goal, let's say, in a neighborhood council? How do you accommodate, again, if we say, well, let's say there's a minority someplace of some kind in a neighborhood. Does this discussion come up? How do you take care of those folks and make sure that they have a shot?
Well, one of the things we're talking about is within every neighborhood district council is always making sure that if a neighborhood council comes out with a statement, that they do have a minority report or a minority vote.
I saw that in one of the...
And we're certainly, we're looking at one of the key issues that comes up in designing this process is how do we make this really representative? How do we ensure that the voices that are not often heard are heard? How do we make sure that areas in the city that are not often heard or have not been organized become organized? And so we're looking at lots of different ways to try to do that.
Okay.
And some of that is putting it in the language, in the expectations. We also see that in the role of the liaison position.
Right. Talk about that a little bit. The liaison between the neighborhood and the city, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that's written into the charter is that the city will provide a liaison between neighborhood councils and the city. And so we've been conceptualizing how should that, what skills does that person need to have? What would their role be? at this point, what we're looking at is we see that person as someone who has really community organizing skills, who has skills working with lots of different people, facilitation skills, doing outreach, who's familiar with working with a city government, either Missoula or another city government, and who can be that bridge between, again, neighborhood councils and city government. And we also see that person with helping, certainly in the first year of getting neighborhood councils up and running, initiating the selection process, checking in with neighborhood councils to make sure that neighborhood councils are fulfilling their obligation to make sure that they're really representing their area, that those minority voices are heard. Also, to see that the lines of communication are open between city and neighborhood councils, as well as between neighborhood councils and one another. And, one thing we haven't mentioned yet tonight, the community council, which is the community-wide council where each of the neighborhood council districts comes together.
This is all part of what we voted for too?
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Thanks for the refreshing.
Councils and a community-wide
okay,
council.
so we established the neighborhood councils, and somewhere in there, and this is also part of your mission?
It is.
All right, so there's then the neighborhood councils then kind of work through, say it, you just said it.
So there's the neighborhood councils.
Right.
Then
8
there's
or 11, maybe, or 9, or whatever.
And then there's a community-wide council, which we're looking at having 1 or 2 representatives from each district council would serve on a community-wide council. And that council would be looking at citywide, community-wide issues. It would be a place for neighborhood councils to come together and hear each other, have those dialogues that John's been talking about.
Right.
To share information, share resources.
Right.
If one neighborhood council has had a lot of success with something, they can share that success and share those skills with other neighborhoods.
Right.
So the community-wide council is going to play a really important piece in that communication.
Okay. I'm glad we got to that, because I think that's a big piece of the puzzle that I was forgetting or missing.
Yeah.
No, it's a very important part, McCarthy, because I think we spend a lot of our time looking at how this system of neighborhood district councils is going to act as a conduit of information between the city and the neighborhoods, back and forth. But there's a third leg to that tripod of communication, and that's between the neighborhoods themselves, and that's what has to happen in the community council.
Everybody gets nervous when it comes to taxes and money and expenditures. I mean, are you also trying to project? I mean, is the city asking you to project, a budget to keep things on the? And what are some of our, ballparks from here to here? I mean, I realize this is, I don't mean to put you on the spot because you're still trying to figure it out, but. So far, I mean, what do you could give us an impression of what you think minimally we might, at the same time successfully, what do we need to spend to make this, to give it a good start?
I don't know that we could even give you a ballpark right now, because we haven't even discussed a ballpark amongst ourselves.
Like they're
right.
It sounds like there'd be at least one.
But what we can tell you, is give you a sense of what needs to happen. All right, there needs to be this liaison person. Okay. That we see at this point in time being half an FTE. I mean, a half a full-time equivalent person, and then
administrative costs for each of the neighborhood district councils to do, just to do mailings, postage, maybe. A once-a-year survey or a once-a-year newsletter.
So they'd have a little pot of funds to feel that they didn't have to go around with the hat every time, to do some.
Right. And what's interesting though, McCarthy, is the city is spending funds right now trying to do this, and in their strategic planning process, they have identified in almost every one of their departments an importance for better and increased communication between citizens and neighborhoods. And this isn't going to happen for free now. What we're saying is, here is a structure that will help you do what you've already identified as an objective for the city. So this isn't going to be free, but I also don't see it as brand new costs either.
Right. Does the I'm sorry? Callers, we're having difficulties with our phone system, and if you're running into some blockage, it's not you, and don't blame us. It's that phone, and we'll take some MCAT funds. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we need a new phone. Anyway, we'll try line 2. I think we had reached a breaking point there anyway, right? Hi, you're on the air. I hope.
Yes, I am.
Okay, go for it.
I'd like to make one suggestion.
Yeah.
For at least from my point of view, no matter how many meetings are held on the 6th and on the 8th, we're still going to have people who say, "But I don't understand. How does this work?" Is it possible for you 11 people to have a demonstration? The people who come to the meeting can be divided into maybe 3 neighborhoods as they are there. And they can come up with something. You can show them how to contact each other and how it would go along. I think a demonstration and doing something like that would be better than just listening.
I don't know. My reaction is good to that one.
Yeah.
It's probably more work, but I don't know. Thank you. Any other comments?
I like some of the comments about, especially the person who called and is against this because he has a good relationship with his city council member and feels that he can always go to it. But as John said, that's a rather selfish way. When you go to the city council, it would be better to be representing the view of many, either in your neighborhood or in the whole city. So I like the idea of the councils or the districts or whatever you want to call them. Thank you.
Well, thank you for a good idea. All right. That was, well, I guess you'll think about that, right?
Yeah, and actually I would say that we're still in the process of designing those meetings, but we want to make those meetings interactive, and I think that we will, we may not do exactly what the caller suggested, but probably something like it. And so
we're going to take about another 6 minutes of your time. I'm sure that there are just probably at least 15,000 Missoulians at home tonight glued to their television sets watching the three of us, totally edified. But it's always worth it to be here. And I'd say, when you were talking, I had a thought. I mean, I'm a media freak to one degree or another. That when these, especially perhaps not when all the neighborhood councils meet, I find still a lack of, that we're still not taking as much advantage of our community channel here, because there's actually 3 channels. A lot of people don't know because we haven't expanded yet, but there are 3 reserved channels, one for the public, one for education, and one for government. So right now, according to the ordinance that we operate under, the cable franchise ordinance, we're about at the level, because right now we're all 3 channels, the public, education, and government. But we're right about the level of usage by the public that we're going to, have to go through the process, and which is simple enough because the ordinance has laid it out. So there, then we'll spill over, and there'll be a separate channel for education, as was originally designed, as soon as we ran out of supply of time and studio space, etc. And my point here is that maybe not necessarily with the neighborhood councils, but if there was like a when that community council meets, because it is surprising even to me how active Missoula citizens are, and they do watch the school board, and they do watch city council. So maybe that also would be something that they would want to watch and learn from and be on the alert to. So we do live almost in the 21st century, and I still want to meet with my friends in neighborhoods, like here on Thursday, March 6th again. That's next week, right?
the week after next. Well, I guess this,
Next
this
week.
is Sunday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
next-
this is Sunday, next week.
Next,
Yeah.
all right, a week from this Thursday,
Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday, March the 6th at 7 p.m., and then 2 days later on a Saturday at 2 p.m., a matinee, both at the United Methodist Church across from the library. So that'll be your next opportunity to directly jump in. But I wanted to put in that plug for media and our using.
And I just wanted to add to that. We meet the first Monday of the month, and then the following weeks every Thursday from 7 till 9 at the Missoula Children's Theater. And those are open meetings. We welcome people to come to those meetings, and they are publicized in the paper if you want to find out more about them.
And I want to say it's always interesting in Missoula that you know, I can't say that I know John Torma and Sue Silverberg, you know, really, really well. I mean, I'm not yet at the stage where they won't throw me out if I show up at their house and I stay too long, like my own family and friends. But I do know them as fellow citizens trotting on through city life over the years. And so I want, you know, a lot of people watching TV, they assume that if you're on TV, you must be somebody really, really significant. So I think it's important that to know that I'm jobless, and John Torma is the facilities manager at Missoula Children's Theater, and Sue Silverberg manages over at Carlos One Night Stand, secondhand clothing emporium there on 3rd Street. So in a way, I guess we're all ordinary citizens. Some are employed and some are not. But I wanted to, before we finish up, we got a few minutes, and once again, thanks to a super crew. I wanted to throw out a couple of more specific questions. What happens, like, give us an idea of how many people would live in the one option district. You know, you got one map with 8 districts. What's kind of the average population in those districts, like in the 8, more or less?
There's going to be a wide range, actually, McCarthy.
Okay. So some districts, by numbers, will be bigger than
For
others.
instance, the Grantland district is
Right.
going to be much smaller in terms of population.
Right. But because of the community council, I would
Right.
say that even if it's if my neighborhood
Mhm.
only has 5 people and your neighborhood has 20, I'm still going to have the same number of
Yeah.
representatives at the community council level as you do, with
Right.
your greater majority.
Once again, I would reiterate that these are not intended to be even
Right.
quasi-legislative. They
Right.
have a whole different purpose.
Right.
We talked about trying to set up these neighborhood districts in such a way where they would represent more equal numbers like we do in wards. But what that did was totally violate neighborhoods. You couldn't do it. We'd be cutting neighborhoods in half, and one half of a neighborhood would be in one district and one in another, and it would be for a totally spurious reason.
Right. And let me follow that up quick. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I mean, people at home, you know, watching us are probably just so overcome with delight and pleasure and excitement that this is already too much for them. So we'll wrap it up soon. But no, it's been good for me because I mean I try and you know, ask the thick questions, meaning the dumb ones. But let's say I live in downtown. You know, a lot of single occupancy housing down here. You know, small one-room apartments and, you know, rooming houses and things like that. And you were talking earlier about trying to accommodate, in other words, what the businesses are part of a community, right?
You bet.
So you were talking earlier about accommodating minorities. I mean, could you give us any sense of the discussions or what you've heard? How is a downtown neighborhood? You know, how do you, or...
Well, you know, one of the things, if you look at both of the options that we've done, is that we've kind of combined, I mean, there's many neighborhoods in each district, and we've actually looked at combining areas that are more active with areas that haven't been active.
Okay.
So that we can kind of, the areas that have a
It's like
history
Big
of being
Brother,
active,
Little Sister.
can kind of bring the other area along and share their organizing skills and tools.
And lastly, in fact, we can go another couple of minutes, but in your own minds, you know, when you work this through, there's always like, you know, it's like, what's your chief worry? And, you know, I mean, in other words, is it as you look down the road a year from now or a year and a half, I mean, what concerns you about if we somehow flop? I mean, not as, let's say you do the best that you can yourselves, and so does it. What are the pitfalls that we face to be successful?
Well, I think that the city has to demonstrate some investment in this process, specifically with financial resources, like we've mentioned in terms of the liaison person and giving each of the councils enough startup funds in order to do some mailings.
Mm-hmm.
I think if the city doesn't make that investment, if there aren't enough resources for the councils, that could certainly be a downfall. Certainly an issue that we talk a lot about is that issue of representation, is how do we guarantee that neighborhood councils will really be inclusive and representative?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've come up with some good ideas to encourage that happening. And I guess, honestly, I have to say I don't have a lot of fears about it. I feel really excited about this process. I think it's going to really benefit Missoula.
One last question, and then if you have something to add as well. I noticed in the reports from some of the other cities that some or many of the neighborhood districts, which may have been informal, neighborhood organizations or what have you, but some of them went for what is, as many of us know, as 501c3 not-for-profit status, so that they were officially organized, on yet another level, so that they could, as a not-for-profit organization or institution, maybe take on, work or projects in the neighborhood that otherwise they wouldn't be eligible to. Maybe, for example, housing.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that's come up in your discussions at all, or will this appear? Or
these sorts of things have come up.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these types of things have come up in our discussions, McCarthy. But we have tried to rein ourselves in, because it's a lot of fun to start imagining the wonderful things these things can do once they're up and going.
Right.
But we keep pulling ourselves back and saying, let's focus on what needs to be done to really get these things up and running, because this
that will happen or not happen in due time.
Yes, and quite frankly, I would go beyond that and say that eventually will happen if these things are going to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if all that neighborhood councils are going to deal with is going to be zoning issues and barking dogs and so on and so forth, they may survive, but they won't thrive. They'll thrive when they start getting into these more exciting community building issues that really only happen when people come together and work together.
Okay, just let me take a minute because we're gonna go soon. But I want to remind our audience that which camera am I on? Over here, all right. That we have our free speech night every Monday night at MCAT. It's only 20 minutes, which gives you a short amount of time, but we'll give you, if you need it, we'll give you more than the 3 minutes at City Council. But that's every Monday night at 6:30 until 10 minutes to 7. You don't need to make an appointment. You don't need anybody's approval. It is the First Amendment show on MCAT. Monday night, 6:30, walk in, speak your piece, and you can say whatever you want, because that's the way it goes here at MCAT under terms of the First Amendment. So that's Monday night. On Wednesday night, I'm privileged to, I'm going to be on Andy's talk show Wednesday night, and I don't know if you've seen Andy's talk show, but I have been lusting for years to be on Andy's talk show, and I don't have to be. You see how I'm a very serious man, and so I'm looking forward to be on Andy's talk show on Wednesday, and it'll be fun. Andy and his friend Catherine and I talked over some of the, gimcracks we may try and pull off, but that should be fun. It's at 7 o'clock. So at 7 o'clock, there can be no obscenities, but there can be bleeping. And that's Wednesday night, and then Thursday night, I think I have to get serious again, and I should be on the air here at 9 o'clock on Thursday night with supposedly a report from the legislature, which we're calling Under the Copper Dome, and I'm the news junkie. And so now I'll turn to John Torma and Sue Silverberg and say thanks a lot for coming down. And I've enjoyed myself. I have learned something, and I hope that it's been beneficial to you people. And thanks for your hard work. I don't know how you keep plodding along. What are you? What are you, a government freak or something?
No.
I mean, you're not. What are you getting paid under the
Are you
table?
kidding?
First, you were on the local government study commission. That wasn't paying enough, and you signed up for this. Anyway, thanks for your work, and good luck, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you, McCarthy.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thanks a lot, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for watching NCAT, and thanks, crew.
Thanks, crew.
You bet.